The red sky above the Zellery homeworld burned like a dying star. Ambassador Cathal crouched in his underground bunker, feeling the ground shake with each explosion above. The Kronok Empire's ships had been bombing his people for 3 days straight. Ancient cities that had stood for thousands of years were now nothing but melted glass and smoking ruins. Kethal's hands shook as he worked on the old quantum beacon. This machine was their last chance. It could send messages across the galaxy, but nobody knew if anyone would listen. His people were dying up there and he was running out of time. "Please work," he whispered to the machine. The beacon flickered to life with a weak blue glow. Taking a deep breath, Kethel spoke into the communicator. His voice cracked with emotion. "To anyone who can hear this message, we are the Zelari people. For 3,000 years, we have lived in peace. We've never hurt anyone. We grow food, we make art, we take care of our children, but now we're going to die." He paused, listening to another explosion above. Dust fell from the ceiling. "The Kronok Empire is destroying us. They've already killed billions of my people. They turn entire planets into ash and move on to the next world. We're begging for help from anyone out there. Please, if you have ships, if you have weapons, help us. Have nowhere else to turn." The message shot out into space at the speed of light, racing toward distant stars. Hours passed, then days. Cathal stayed by the beacon, hoping for any response. Finally, the replies started coming in. The first was from the Centauri Alliance. "We're sorry for your situation, but our fleet is too small to help." The second came from the Vegan Republic. "We wish you well, but the distance is too great for our ships to reach you in time." More messages arrived, all saying the same thing. "Sorry, can't help. Too dangerous. Not our problem." Cathal's heart sank. His people were going to die alone. And nobody in the galaxy cared enough to help strangers. But then something strange happened. A new message came through, from a system, the old star charts, called Sol 3. Nobody had ever heard of these people. Before, far away, on a small blue planet called Earth, Captain Rick Morrison was drinking coffee on the bridge of his patrol ship, the USS Defiance. It was supposed to be a quiet day. Then his communications officer, Lieutenant Amy Foster, called out, "Captain, we're getting a weird signal from deep space. It's not in any language I know." "Put it through the translator," Rick said. "The ships." Computer worked for a minute, then played the message. Everyone on the bridge went quiet as they listened to Cathal's desperate plea. Rick could hear the fear in the alien's voice, even through the translation. "Sir," Amy said softly, "should we report this to Earth Command?" Rick was already reaching for his communicator. "This is Captain Morrison to Earth Command. We've got a situation out here. Some aliens are being wiped out, and they're asking for help." Within an hour, the message was playing in the White House, the United Nations. In every major capital on Earth, President David Williams called an emergency session. Something incredible happened next. For the first time in human history, every country on Earth agreed on something immediately. Republicans and Democrats, Americans and Russians, Indians and Pakistanis, everyone said the same thing. We have to help them. President Williams went on television 6 hours after the message arrived. "My fellow humans," he said, "today we received a call for help from across the stars. Peaceful people are being murdered, and they asked if anyone would help them. The answer is yes." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "A stranger asked for help. That's all we need to know. We're sending everything we've got." Within minutes, every military base on Earth was buzzing with activity. Soldiers ran to their ships. Pilots jumped into fighters. Even civilian captains volunteered their cargo ships to join the fleet. Admiral Ben Parker stood in the Pentagon War Room, watching reports flood in. "Sir," his aide said, "the European Union is sending their entire space fleet. So are the Chinese, Russians, Indians, and Brazilians. Even the small countries are sending whatever ships they have." "What about weapons?" Ben asked. "Civilian factories are working around the clock. They're mounting guns on everything that can fly. Passenger ships, cargo haulers, even some rich guy's yacht." Ben shook his head in amazement. "In all my years, I've never seen anything like this. We're about to send the largest fleet in human history to help people we've never met. Back on the dying Zalari world, Cathal was losing hope. The bombing had gotten worse. Half his city was gone. Then his beacon chirped with a new message. The voice was strange, speaking a language the computer had trouble translating. But the meaning was clear. This is Earth Command responding to your distress call. Help is coming. Hold on. Thal stared at the machine. Someone was coming to help his people. He didn't know it yet, but the humans weren't just sending a few ships. They were sending everything they had, ready to fight and die for aliens they'd never met. The greatest rescue mission in galactic history was about to begin. The space above the burning Zelari homeworld had been filled with Chronok warships for days. Their dark, twisted vessels looked like giant metal spiders against the stars. Commander Vexka sat in his flagship, watching his forces slowly destroy. Another world. This was how it always went. His empire would arrive, demand surrender, then crush anyone who refused. 42 worlds had fallen this way. But today, something strange was about to happen. The first sign was a ripple in space itself, then another, then dozens more. Vexka's sensor operator called out in confusion. Sir, we're detecting massive hyperspace exits. Multiple contacts incoming. Reinforcements for the locals? Vexka asked, not really worried.
Ow.
The Zelari had already sent out their desperate calls for help. A few alien ships might show up, but it wouldn't matter. Then the human fleet arrived. It started with a single ship dropping out of hyperspace. Sleek destroyer with strange markings. Then 10 more appeared. Then 100. Then 1,000. The space around the Zelari homeworld filled with more ships than Vexka had ever seen in one place. Count them, he ordered his tactical officer. Sir? I'm reading 3,000 ships, maybe more. They're still arriving.
Yes.
Vexka stared at his display screen in disbelief. 3,000 ships? His entire invasion fleet had only 800 vessels, and that was considered massive by galactic standards. But it wasn't just the numbers that shocked him, it was the ships themselves. Yes, there were proper warships, destroyers, cruisers, and carriers that looked dangerous and well-armed. But mixed in with them were things that made no sense. There were cargo ships with missile launchers welded to their hulls, passenger liners converted into troop transports, even what looked like luxury yachts with gun turrets bolted on top. One ship appeared to be a space-going cruise liner with weapons sticking out of every window. What kind of military sends cruise ships to war? Vexka muttered. His communications officer spoke up. Sir, we're getting a transmission from the newcomers. Human voice came over the radio, speaking in accented galactic standard. This is Admiral Tom Bradley of the Terran Defense Fleet, responding to the Zelari distress call. We're here to help. Deska had never heard of Terrans before. To a private channel with his fleet commanders? Does anyone know what a Terran is? Never heard of them, sir, came the reply. But they've got a lot of ships. Down on the Zelari homeworld, Admiral Lethra was in her underground command center, coordinating the defense of her dying world. Her people had been fighting bravely, but they were losing. Half their cities were destroyed, and Chronok ground forces were landing everywhere. Then her sensor operator screamed. Admiral ships. Thousands of ships dropping out of hyperspace. Lethra's heart sank. More Chronok reinforcements? No, ma'am. These are different. They're taking positions around our evacuation ships. They're protecting our civilians. Lethra ran to the main display screen and gasped. The space above her world was filled with foreign vessels. Now they were moving to shield her people's refugee ships from Chronok fire. A transmission came through on the emergency frequency. The voice was strange, alien, but the translation was, Clear, Zelari forces. This is the human fleet. We received your call for help. We're here. Tears ran down Lethra's face. In all her years as a military officer, she had never seen anything like this. When the Zelari had sent out their desperate plea for help, she had hoped maybe 1 or 2 neighboring species might send a few ships. Instead, these unknown humans had sent everything they had. They came, she whispered to herself. They actually came back in space. The human fleet was spreading out in defensive formations. Admiral Tom Bradley stood on the bridge of his flagship, the UES Liberty, watching his ships move into position. This was the largest fleet Earth had ever assembled. Every nation had contributed whatever they could spare, and many had contributed more than they could afford to lose. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "all ships are in position. We've got the evacuation zones covered." Tom nodded. Through his view screen, he could see Zalari refugee ships, civilian vessels packed with families fleeing the destruction below. Kronak warships were still firing on them, trying to kill defenseless aliens. "Open a channel to all human ships." Tom ordered. "Channel open, sir?" "This is Admiral Bradley to all Terran vessels. Our mission is simple. These people asked for help, so we're going to help them. Every civilian ship that makes it to safety is a victory. Every family we save is worth the trip. Make Earth proud." Responses came flooding back from captains across the fleet. We're fed as essential seven losses as ancestors seven ascenses and that admiral, ready to kick some tail? Let's show these bullies what humans are made of. On the Kronak flagship, Commander Vexka was studying the human formations with growing confusion. His military analysts had been watching the newcomers for an hour, and nothing made sense. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "they're not taking offensive positions. They're just protecting the evacuation ships." "What do you mean?" "Look. At this, sir, every time we fire on a Zalari civilian vessel, human ships move to block our shots. They're using their own warships as shields for alien refugees." Exka stared at the tactical display. It was true. The humans had superior numbers and could probably defeat his fleet in direct combat, but instead of attacking, they were just defending Zalari civilians. "This makes no tactical sense," Vexka said. "They could destroy us, but they're risking their own ships to save alien refugees instead." His second in command, Captain Zexra, shook his head. "Sir, in 42 conquered worlds, we've never seen anything like this. Most species barely defend their own civilians. These humans are dying for aliens they've never met." Vexka opened a communication channel to the human admiral. "Terran Commander, this is Fleet Commander Vexka of the Kronak Empire. Why are you here? The Zalari are not your people." Admiral Tom's reply was simple and direct. "They asked for help. That's enough." "You're willing to die for strangers? That's what it takes?" Vexka closed the channel and stared out at the human fleet. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered enemies like this. They fought not for territory or resources, but simply because someone had asked for help. For the first time in his military career, Vexka felt uncertain about victory. The largest rescue operation in galactic history was about to begin. The humans were ready to fight against impossible odds for people they had never met. The first shots of the battle came at dawn. Kronak warships opened fire on a group of Zalari evacuation vessels trying to escape the planet's atmosphere. These weren't military targets. They were passenger ships packed with families, children, and elderly aliens fleeing for their lives. That's when the humans showed the galaxy, something it had never seen before. Captain Mike Davis was commanding the destroyer USS Ranger when the attack started. His ship was small compared to the massive Kronak battlecruiser bearing down on a Zalari hospital ship. The alien vessel was painted with medical symbols and was clearly marked as non-combatant. It carried wounded civilians and had no weapons. "That hospital ship won't make it," his weapons officer called out. The Chronoc cruiser has them locked on. Mike didn't hesitate. All power to engines. Ram course, sir. His helmsman looked shocked. That's a suicide run. Can't win against a battle cruiser. We're not trying to win, Mike said calmly, buying them time to escape. The Ranger shot forward, engines screaming. Mike opened a channel to the hospital ship. Zellery vessel, this is Captain Davis. Get out of here now. You've got your back. The Chronoc battlecruiser fired its main guns at the hospital ship, but the Ranger threw itself into the path of the energy beams. The destroyer's shields flared and died instantly. Hull plating melted away. The ship was dying, but it stayed on course. Get those civilians out of here. Mike shouted over the cum as his bridge filled with smoke. Then the Ranger slammed into the Chronoc battlecruiser. At full speed, both ships exploded in a ball of fire. But the hospital ship escaped. Across the battlefield, similar scenes were playing out. Lieutenant Amy Foster was piloting a fighter when she saw Chronoc missiles heading for a Zellery school transport. The ship was clearly marked with educational symbols. It was carrying alien children to safety. Amy's fighter was already damaged. From an earlier engagement, her left engine was failing, and her weapons were almost out of ammunition. But she didn't think twice. She threw her fighter directly between the missiles and the transport ship. This is Lieutenant Foster to any human ships in the area. Protect that school ship at all costs. The missiles hit her fighter instead of their intended target. Amy's last transmission was calm and clear. Transport is clear. Tell my mom I did something that mattered. The school ship, carrying 300 alien children, made it to safety. Commander Vexka watched these exchanges from his flagship bridge, growing more confused by the hour. His tactical computers were supposed to predict enemy behavior, but the humans were doing things that made no military sense. Sir, his analyst reported, the human fleet has lost 47 ships in the last 2 hours. But they're not retreating. They're not even trying to attack us directly. What are they doing? Vexka demanded. They're using their warships as shields, sir? Every time we target Zellery civilian vessels, human ships move to block our fire. They're sacrificing their own military assets to save alien non-combatants. Vexka pulled up the tactical display. It was true. The humans had enough firepower to seriously damage his fleet, but instead of attacking, they were playing defense. They were literally dying to protect strangers. This is not how war works, Vexka muttered. Military forces are supposed to preserve themselves first, complete the mission second. These humans are throwing away strategic advantages to save individual alien lives. His second-in-command, Captain Zexra, pointed to another part of the display. Sir, look at this. Human medical ship just moved into the combat zone. There, rescuing wounded Chronoc soldiers. Our soldiers? Yes, sir. They're treating our wounded the same as their own. Vexka opened a communication channel to the human medical ship. Human vessel. Why are you aiding Chronoc wounded? We are your enemies. The reply came from Dr. Janet Torres, the ship's chief medical officer. Because they're hurt and we can help. That's what doctors do. Vexka closed the channel and stared. At the display, in 42 conquered worlds, he had never encountered anything like this. Most species would leave enemy wounded to die. These humans were risking their own lives to save Chronoc soldiers who had been trying to kill them minutes earlier. Sir, his communications officer called out, we're getting reports from all sectors. Human behavior is the same everywhere. Sacrificing their ships to save Zellery civilians. They're treating our wounded. They're even sharing their food supplies with Zellery refugees. Vexka sent an urgent report to Chronoc High Command. The humans fight unlike any species we have encountered. They use their vessels as shields for enemy civilians. They sacrifice strategic positions to save individual alien lives. They treat enemy wounded as well as their own. This defies all military logic, but it makes them incredibly dangerous. The response from his superiors was swift. Explain how defensive behavior makes them dangerous. Vexka thought for a moment before replying. Because they're willing to die for principles rather than victory. You cannot defeat an enemy who values alien lives more than their own survival, and their behavior is inspiring the locals to fight harder. This was true. Across the Zalari homeworld, alien defenders were watching human ships sacrifice themselves to protect Zalari civilians. The sight was inspiring incredible bravery among the local forces. Zalari Admiral Lethra broadcast to her remaining forces, "Look at what these humans are doing for us. They traveled across the galaxy and are dying to protect our families. If they can fight this hard for strangers, we can fight this hard for our own world." Zalari resistance stiffened everywhere. Soldiers who had been ready to surrender were now fighting with desperate courage. They couldn't let down these incredible humans who were sacrificing everything for them, Captain. Bob Wilson of the cruiser New York was defending a group of Zalari transports when his ship took critical damage. He could have retreated to save his crew, but there were still civilians trying to escape. "All hands. This is the captain," he announced over the ship's intercom. "We're staying in position until every last transport is clear. Anyone who wants to abandon ship, do it now. But I'm not leaving while those families are still in danger." Not a single crew member left their post. The human fleet was taking massive casualties, but they held their ground. Every sacrifice saved alien lives. Every act of heroism inspired the Zalari to fight harder. The galaxy was witnessing something it had never seen before: a species that would die for strangers simply because it was the right thing to do, and that changed everything. By the third day of fighting, space around the Zalari homeworld looked like a graveyard. Broken human ships drifted between the stars, their hulls torn open and their lights forever dark. The proud Earth fleet that had arrived with 3,000 outdated vessels was now down to less than half that number. Captain Alex Turner stood on what was left of his cruiser's bridge, watching his instruments flicker and die one by one. The New Hope had taken a direct hit from a Chronok plasma cannon 2 hours ago. Half his crew was dead, and the ship was slowly bleeding air into space through dozens of hull breaches. "Sir," his helmsman called out weakly, blood running down his face from a head wound, "life support is failing. We need to abandon ship." Alex looked out through the cracked view screen at the Zalari refugee convoy they were protecting. Thousands of alien families were crammed into those civilian transports, fleeing their burning world. If the New Hope retreated, now the Chronok destroyers would slaughter them all. "Negative," Alex said firmly. "We hold position until those transports clear the gravity well." "But sir, we'll die if we stay." Alex smiled sadly. "We might die if we stay. Those families will definitely die if we leave." The ship shuddered as another enemy blast struck their failing shields. Sparks flew from control panels, and the lights dimmed even further. Alex opened a channel to Earth Command, knowing it might be his last transmission. "Control, this is Captain Turner aboard the New Hope. We're not going to make it home, but I want you to know something. We didn't come here to win a war. We came because someone needed help. Don't let our sacrifice be meaningless. Keep fighting. For them." The transmission cut out as the New Hope's communications array exploded. What Alex didn't know was that his message hadn't just reached Earth's command. The quantum communication networks that connected the galaxy meant his final words were heard across dozens of star systems. Species that had been watching the battle from afar suddenly heard the dying words of a human captain who was about to sacrifice his life for aliens he'd never met on the water world of Thalon Prime. Merchant Captain Kessna was loading medical supplies onto his cargo ship when he heard Alex's transmission, stopped what he was doing, and listened to the human's final words, feeling something stir in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. "Sir?" his first officer asked. "Continue loading?" Kessna looked at the medical supplies, antibiotics, surgical equipment, emergency rations. His people had been planning to sell these goods to the highest bidder, but now, listening to humans die for strangers, that plan seemed wrong. "Change course," Kessna ordered. "We're going to the Zalari system, sir, but that's a war zone. We could lose everything." Maybe, Kessna said, thinking of Captain Turner's sacrifice. But sometimes doing the right thing is more important than profit. Within hours, dozens of Thalon merchant ships were changing course for the battle zone, their cargo holds full of medical supplies and food for the refugees. On the military world of Eridan, General Vothka was in an emergency meeting with his war council. They had been debating for days whether to get involved in the Zalari crisis. Kronak Empire was powerful, and interfering could mean war. Then they heard the human transmissions, captain after captain dying to protect alien civilians, ships ramming enemy vessels to save refugee transports, pilots sacrificing themselves to shield school ships full of children they'd never met. General Zvathka said quietly, "I've been a soldier for 40 years. I've seen courage and sacrifice, but I've never seen anything like this. These humans are dying not for their own people, not for territory or resources, but simply because strangers asked for help." The room was silent for a moment. "If we don't help them," Vothka continued, "if we let this example of pure compassion die in space while we debate politics, then we're not the civilized species we claim to be." The vote was unanimous. Within 6 hours, the entire air-aiden battle fleet was jumping to hyperspace, heading for the Zellery system. Back in the battle zone, Admiral Tom Bradley stood on his damaged flagship, watching his fleet continue to shrink. They had saved thousands of Zellery civilians, but the cost was enormous. People were dying every minute, and he was running out of ships. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "I'm picking up hyperspace signatures." "Multiple contacts?" Approaching, Tom's heart sank. Kronak reinforcements would finish what was left of his fleet. "How many?" "I'm not sure, sir. The readings are ... massive." Then the first ships dropped out of hyperspace. But they weren't Kronak vessels. They were Thalan merchant ships, their hulls painted with medical crosses. "This is Captain Kesna of the Thalan Medical Corps," came a transmission. "We heard your captain's final message. We're here to help with medical supplies and refugee transport." Before Tom could respond, more ships appeared. Sleek Aridin warships, their weapons powered up and ready for battle. "Human fleet, this is General Vothka of the Aridin Alliance. We've come to stand with you." Then came the real shock. Massive dreadnoughts from the galactic core worlds, the most powerful military force in known space, dropped out of hyperspace. These were ships that usually stayed neutral in all conflicts. "Admiral Bradley," came a deep, resonant voice. "This is Fleet Commander Zental of the Core World's Navy. We've been monitoring your battle. Your species has reminded us what honor means. We stand with Earth." Tom stared at the tactical display. In amazement, hundreds of alien ships were arriving from dozens of different species. The Vegan Republic sent hospital ships. The Centauri Alliance brought fuel and ammunition. Even tiny species that barely had space programs sent whatever ships they could spare. Lieutenant Kelly Foster, the communications officer, looked up from her station with tears in her eyes. "Sir, we're getting messages from all over the galaxy. They all say the same thing. They heard our people's final transmissions. They heard humans dying for strangers, and it inspired them to act." One message stood out from the others. It came from the Andromedans, a species so advanced and distant that most people thought they were myths. "Humans of Earth," the message said, "in 10,000 years of galactic observation, we have never witnessed such selfless compassion from a species. You have honored not just yourselves, but the very concept of civilization itself. We offer our aid." Tom realized what had happened. Humanity hadn't just come to rescue the Zelari. They had accidentally reminded the entire galaxy what it meant. To care about strangers, their willingness to die for aliens they'd never met, had shamed dozens of species into remembering their own lost compassion. "Captain," Turner's final message was right. Their sacrifice wouldn't be meaningless. The humans had started something that would change the galaxy forever. For the first time in 3 days, Tom smiled. The tide was turning. The battle that had raged for 3 bloody days was finally reaching its end, but not in the way anyone expected. Commander Vexka stood on his flagship bridge, staring at a tactical display that showed something he had never seen in his 40 years of conquest. His mighty Kronak Empire was losing. It wasn't the numbers that defeated him. Even with all the alien reinforcements that had arrived, his fleet could probably still win a straight fight. It was something else entirely that broke every rule of warfare he had ever learned. "Sir," his tactical officer reported nervously, "the humans are doing it again. Our bombers have a clear shot at the Zelari capital city, but 3 human cruisers just moved into our firing line. They're using themselves as shields for the alien population centers. Vexka watched the display in growing frustration. Time his forces tried to target military installations or population centers. Human ships would throw themselves into harm's way. They were literally dying to protect strangers, and it was making it impossible to win the war in any conventional sense. "How many human ships have we destroyed?" he asked. "Over 1,500, sir. More than half their original fleet." "They're still fighting? Harder than ever, sir?" "Every time we kill one of their ships, the others seem to fight with more determination." Vexka opened a communication channel to his field commanders. Status report from all sectors. The replies painted the same picture everywhere. Human ships sacrificing themselves to save alien civilians. Human medical teams treating Kronak wounded alongside their own. Human supply ships sharing food with Zellery refugees even while under fire. But worse than that, this insane human compassion was spreading. The Thalan merchants who had arrived were now fighting alongside the humans instead of just delivering supplies. Eridan warships were copying human tactics, using themselves as shields for refugee transports. Even his own soldiers were starting to question why they were trying to kill beings who would risk their lives to save Kronak wounded. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're getting reports of desertion in 3 sectors. Some of our crews are refusing to fire on human medical ships." Vexka closed his eyes. This was how civilizations fell, not from superior firepower, but from a collapse of will to fight. The humans had somehow made this war about something bigger than territory or resources. They had made it about the very soul of what it meant. To be civilized, his secure communicator buzzed with a message from Kronak High Command. The Supreme Leader's words were cold and final. "Commander Vexka, our intelligence reports indicate that 47 different species are now sending aid to the humans. This conflict is spreading beyond acceptable parameters. We were ordered to withdraw immediately." Vexka stared at the message. In the entire history of the Kronak Empire, they had never retreated from a battle they could still win. But this wasn't about winning anymore. It was about survival. He opened a channel too. "All Kronak vessels. All ships, this is Fleet Commander Vexka. We are withdrawing from this system immediately. Prepare for hyperspace jump." His officers looked shocked. "Sir, we're retreating." "We're not retreating," Vexka said quietly. "We're learning. These humans have taught us something we didn't expect. You cannot defeat an enemy whose greatest weapon is their willingness to die for strangers. They have changed the rules of warfare itself." As the Kronak fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, Vexka sent one final transmission to Admiral Tom Bradley. "Human Commander, you have won something here that is bigger than a battle. We came here as conquerors. We leave having learned what honor truly means." Then the Kronak ships vanished into hyperspace. Leaving the Zellery system for the first time in months, Admiral Tom Bradley stood on the bridge of his damaged flagship, the Liberty, watching the enemy fleet disappear around him. The combined fleets of dozens of species were working together, rescuing survivors from destroyed ships, tending to the wounded, and helping Zelari refugees return to their partially restored world. Sir Lieutenant Kelly Foster reported, "Final casualty reports are coming in. We lost over 1,600 ships and 40,000 crew members." Tom nodded solemnly. 40,000 good people who would never see Earth again. 40,000. Families who would grieve for heroes who died for aliens they'd never met. But as he looked out at the rescue operations happening all around him, he knew their sacrifice had meaning. The Lan medical ships were working alongside human doctors. Eridan engineers were helping repair Zellery infrastructure. Species that had never cooperated before were now working together as if they were old allies. Ambassador Kethal, the Zellery diplomat who had sent out the original distress call, approached Tom's command station. The alien's scaled face was streaked with tears of gratitude. Admiral Bradley Kethal said, his voice shaking with emotion, "I need to ask you something. Why did you do this? Why did your people sacrifice so much for strangers you had never met? We are not your species. We share no history, no common interests. Yet you crossed the galaxy and 40,000 of your people died for us. Why? Tom looked out through the viewport at the stars, thinking of all the empty chairs that would be waiting back on Earth. Families who would never see their loved ones again because they had chosen to answer a stranger's cry for help. Because, you asked, Tom said simply. Someone was in trouble, and they asked for help. That's all we needed to know. Cathal stared at him. That's it? That's your only reason? What other reason do we need? Tom replied. Isn't that what civilized beings do? Help each other? Before Cathal could respond, the communication array lit up with incoming messages. Lieutenant Foster looked up from her station with a mixture of excitement and concern. Sir, we're getting multiple distress calls from across the galaxy. 3. Different species under attack in distant systems. They're all asking for the same thing. The Zalari asked for help. Tom looked around his bridge at his exhausted crew. They had just finished the bloodiest battle in human history. Half their fleet was destroyed. They should be heading home to rest and rebuild instead. Tom's response was immediate. Signal all remaining human ships and our new allies. We have work to do. Lieutenant Foster smiled as she sent out the order. Within minutes, the combined fleet was changing course toward the first distress signal, as the ships prepared to jump to hyperspace. Tom realized that something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. The humans hadn't just saved one species. They had reminded dozens of civilizations what it meant to care about strangers. They had created something new, a galaxy, where calling for help actually meant something. The age of ignoring distant suffering was over. The age of galactic compassion had begun. And it all started with one simple principle that humans had never forgotten. When someone asks for help, you help them. The galaxy would never be the same.